There are about 3 million pastors in developing countries that do not have the availability or ability to go and get an education in theology and pastoral ministry and those subjects. And that's where Brad comes in. Brad comes in as a senior software engineer with Mission Aviation Fellowship. Now you might say, now what does that, how does that fit with missions? What he's doing is creating and supporting computer programs to help provide distance theological education. How important is that? And so we have tonight with us Brad Rhodes. Would you welcome him together with me? Brad, welcome.
All right, is that better? That's better. Okay, good. So, I'm thrilled to be here. I think God wanted me here. It was quite an experience getting here. I had to change my plane flights twice. There was a big snowstorm in Chicago. I was supposed to come in yesterday. I had to cancel that flight and change it to one for this morning. And then late last night, I got a call from Southwest saying that the flight that I was on this morning had a stopover in Maryland, Baltimore, Maryland, and the snowstorm from Chicago was going right there. So to get here, I actually had to cancel a second flight, had to change carriers. I had to come out on American instead of Southwest, and that meant changing airports, which meant changing my ride. And so I think God wanted me here because, praise the Lord, I made it. And I think it very well may be for me that God wanted me here. It's such a privilege to be among so many senior saints. I am quite the rookie compared to people like Tony and John, who I just had the privilege of having dinner with. It's already been a great encouragement to me to be here, to talk to a couple who've been married for 63 years, I think, was the answer I got. My wife and I are coming up on 23 years in May, so I guess there's hope for me. Do we have the screen or the video? There we go. There's my family. So a new day is dawning, right? Certainly is for me and my heart and my family to begin with. You see my wife Susan there holding Rebecca. Well, maybe I should back up. David, my son David is 14. And then we've got Sarah over there on my shoulder. She's 8. And then we've been blessed with 2 more girls in the last 2 years. Rebecca is about a year and a half now, and Beth was just born a day after Thanksgiving last year. Yeah, so that's why my wife isn't here. She's a little busy with all the babies. So it's quite it's amazing that I'm here at all. It's amazing I'm with MAF, and I want to share with you how God brought us into missions in general and MAF then in particular. I grew up in Wheaton Bible Church back in Wheaton, Illinois, a very missions-focused church, and so I had some great experiences doing some missions in high school. Felt like God might be wanting me in missions at that point in time, but I ignored that because I was pretty sure every kid growing up in a church with 100 missionaries thought that they should be a missionary, and God wouldn't really want me. Skip ahead many years, and my wife and I have been doing various forms of lay youth ministry. And that led us into doing a short-term missions trip that our home church there does every year to an Indian reserve in Ontario, Canada. And the first year we went, I spoke one night and two girls made decisions for Christ. And I was told that was a real breakthrough because in all the years that they had been going, they had never even really gotten to spiritual conversations, let alone people coming to Christ. And I was like, I guess maybe God can use me in this way. And started thinking he might want us to go there permanently. And so I started a master's program at Moody to get prepared to go and start a church at this Indian reserve. And things were going along well. And then July of 2006, we were up at the reserve, and I had an injury. We were doing a scavenger hunt kind of thing with the teenagers up there. And I followed this kid down a really steep hill. And I grabbed onto a vine that looked pretty sturdy, thought it would hold me. Well, it ended up ripping out by the roots, spun me around. I start falling head over heels down this hill. And the last thing I remember is being airborne with my head in a direct line for this rock. Well, I managed to spin in the air and came down with my back on the rock instead of my head, and cracked a rib or two, broke my wrist, and that was just the beginning of the fun, because of the chest of the ribs. They ordered a chest X-ray, and I was really fortunate that the doctor that I got to see there was there because he noticed some spreading in my ribs that he didn't think was explained by the injury that I had had. Well, it turns out that I had a aortic aneurysm that was ready to rupture. It's just a genetic thing. There's never any symptoms. Just all of a sudden your aorta shears off and you bleed out in like 3 heartbeats. So a month later, August of 2006, I had open heart surgery at Mayo Clinic in Minnesota. That's where I'm having all my heart surgeries, by the way. And had a mechanical heart valve put in. And because of that, I have to be on Coumadin, blood thinners, for the rest of my life. And the doctors said that I shouldn't be out of the country more than a week or 2 at a time, and even then I should stay close to university-level medical care. And I was like, okay, well, how does that go along with being a missionary? And so I set up a lunch with my prof from Moody, and I said, well, what do I do now? And he says, well, why don't you come to the missions conference? Probably one of the agencies could use your technical skills. And I reluctantly said yes, because I thought I was leaving all this computer stuff behind. I was going to go start a church. Well, most of my career has been as a consultant, where I could oftentimes work where I want, when I want. So my plan was to go to this 2-day missions conference at Moody, and I was going to talk to every agency. I was going to have my criteria for evaluation, weighted criteria. I was going to score each agency, stack rank them, and be very engineer-like about it, because that's what I do. I'm an engineer, so I got to be, really analytical about everything. Well, I ended up changing contracts just before this conference, and all I could do was take a long lunch. It was downtown Michigan Avenue, not far from Moody, so I was able to go. But all I could do was take a long lunch. And when I got there, all I found was this room full of empty booths and one guy from MAF. Now, I almost left because I was kind of aggravated, but then I thought, wait, no, hold on a second. If this could be a God thing, if I'm supposed to meet one person, the only way I'm going to get it right is if God gets everybody else out of the room. And so I walked up to him and I asked him if they had any technology needs. And he told me about learning technologies, which is about helping to provide distance theological education to pastors in the developing world. So you see, I have an undergrad in computer science and psych, half of a master's in educational technology, half of a master's in computer science, half of a master's in intercultural studies. The medical bills maybe stall out on that one. So I have 3 half master's degrees, which adds up to no masters, but the perfect background for learning technologies. So that's how I got here. Let's see. So what I want to share now is some trends in missions that we try to address in learning technologies. New day is dawning in missions, and technology is part of that change, but it's not about technology. It's still about the gospel. And the first trend that I want to mention is the pastor already alluded to. There are about 3 million pastors in the developing world. Most of them don't have any training, or many of them don't have any training. Most of them will never be able to leave their village to go to a big city or come to the States to get any training. And then here's a trend. About 9 out of 10 that do leave never go back. So we're all about trying to take training to them right where they live and serve. Now, related to that is this next trend, which is more and more we're going towards indigenous missions, or our job here may be to get things going there. But a national is always going to be able to communicate much better than even the most skilled cross-cultural communicator is going to be able to do. So whatever, that 3 million number is probably about 10 years old now. We've made some progress, but whatever progress we've made against those 3 million has probably been backed out by the fact that there's all these new missionaries out there, indigenous missionaries, national missionaries. So the more success we have in training them, the more effective they are. And the more people come to Christ, the more villages have a new pastor that needs training. So it's kind of a self-perpetuating need. So next, mobile. There are 2 really interesting things about the developing world. And I'm sure some of you know this much more personally than I do. First is we're talking about largely oral societies. I see you had the word orality up behind me here. I was excited to see that. That's something we're very, very interested in and work hard at doing. And I'm most interested in using mobile technology, cell phone technology, for oral techniques. So what I'm talking about is even if these people can read or write, many of them can't, but even if they can, they probably still have a preferred oral learning style. So that's the first interesting thing. Second interesting thing is that mobile phones are prolific everywhere you go in the world now. You can go into the jungle and find a guy with a bone in his nose talking on a cell phone. It's true. I have a great ad up in my office. I meant to scan it, and I didn't get it done. But it's an ad for one of the telecom companies in Africa. And it's a picture of a hunter in his regalia with a spear in one hand and a cell phone in the other. And the tagline of the ad is "Lion's worst nightmare." Used to be they'd, drum to communicate to the guy. They just call him. He's coming around the corner. When he comes around the corner, hit him with the rock. So real interested in putting those 2 things together. And I've gotten to do we've completed one project along these lines and into another. The first one we completed is called Telemensaje. And what that is a dial a devotional service. So the person can call up and they'll hear a short devotional, at the end of which they're invited to hear a gospel presentation. And from there, they can connect with a person. Ideally, they'll actually get connected with a person on the line right then and there. If not, they essentially get a voicemail system, and then somebody calls them back. And I had the privilege of installing that system at the end of 2011. We installed it in Africa, serving we installed it in Paris, France, serving Northern Africa. And then we installed it in Central Asia and Ethiopia. And we know for sure of one person coming to Christ in Central Asia because of this. Or trust that there's more. But at least I know for sure there's one person in heaven, partly because of the work they've done. So if I never accomplish anything else in MAF, it's just that is worthwhile, right? And I have a letter from the guys in Central Asia that I meant to bring and read to you, but apparently I left it back in my room or something. So, but we'll have some time in the morning, I think, together. So I'll bring it then. I want to tell you about the next project, and this is something that God gave me a vision and passion for almost immediately upon joining MAF. And that is for a completely interactive, completely voice-based training system. I mentioned that mobile phones are prolific everywhere. Vast majority of those are just basic phones that you can talk on and maybe text. And so I'm developing a system to actually deliver interactive training on those kinds of phones. And I've had this vision for like 5 years now. And I'm just now, in the last 6 months to a year, been able to start working on it. And that's because we never do anything just for the sake of of technology. We need to have somebody on the field that actually needs it. And we're working with a guy now somewhere in Asia that has a curriculum that lends itself to being delivered via just voice. So I'm really excited about that. We've gotten the first prototype of that done. And then this year, we'll do the second prototype, get it real smooth, easy to use. And then the next piece is to create a computer program so that other people will be able to make voice-based courses. And then probably one of the things we can maybe do tomorrow is a little demonstration of that. For lack of a better term, I'm calling it Celluversity. That makes sense in North America. It doesn't make sense to the rest of the world. So I still got to come up with a good name for everywhere else. But I think it gets the idea across. One more trend to mention. Everywhere except in the United States, a very common thing to do is to trade audio files and video files between phones. You can do that with a couple clicks of a button, and it's very, very common to do around the world. It's not done so much in the States, which is kind of surprising. So that's one thing that's really common. Going along with that, there's a real need for Christian resources for Christian leaders. And so the thing that my department has been working on is a portable digital library system. And we're focused right now on these tablets, which aren't prolific in the rest of the world. But this kind of technology is coming. It will run on about 20% of the phones that are out there in the developing world now. Smartphones, about 20% would be able to use this now. So this is a little bit building for the future, but somebody can start with this and share an individual file with somebody with just a basic phone, who could then share it with somebody else, and so on and so forth. So again, maybe if this isn't completely clear right now, maybe a demo tomorrow will clear things up. But hopefully also this video I'm going to show you right now will give you an idea of how this is supposed to work. So hopefully you got a sense of what this is about. The guy meets in a park, shares a video with his friend goes home, shares it with his dad, he goes to a Bible study, shares a Bible with somebody, and they're all on their devices in a Bible study, all studying the Bible in their own language. Finally, I've been at this for a little while now. We're in our second term. And one thing I really desire is that as we meet new people, that will make real connections. Um, and that's largely on me to keep track of people and so forth. But I also hope that we'll get new people that really want to connect with us, beyond just getting our prayer letters and so forth. I'm talking about this verse in this trip. Where your treasure is, there your heart is also. I don't think that's so much about writing a check, right? It's your treasure. It's what you really care about. And I know this group cares about missions. So I'd certainly invite you to partner with us in any way that you'd like. David had his mighty men, and so most definitely looking for some more mighty men and women. And there's about 1 million ways to connect with me, to get in touch with me. Would love to have you get our prayer letters, and you can grab I've got a prayer card out at the table back there, sign-up sheet. We can get you our prayer letters. And I'd love to answer any questions that anybody might have. Yes, sir.
You said you had a bit of a problem flying in here. Why don't you fly MAF?
Well, we only fly places that you can't get to anywhere else, other way. We only fly into the jungle. I, in fact, have never been on an MAF airplane, unfortunately. Any other questions?
So do other missionary organizations do other missionary organizations use what you produce? For instance, I'm thinking of Back to the Bible in Indonesia. I know they use something on a telephone to spread the scripture.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just curious.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we work in learning technologies much the same way that we work in aviation, and that we're typically partnering with other organizations. So in the aviation side, we'll get Fly Doctors Without Borders in, or missionaries. We work with over 600 different organizations, serving them in aviation. So we do the same kind of thing in learning technologies, which is we're typically partnering with another organization to help them be able to do distance education. So that might be a national seminary. Doing a distance education course is a little different from an educational design perspective than a face-to-face classroom environment. So we might work with somebody like that, do maybe the first lesson or two of a course, help them do maybe the next lesson or two, and then be there to support them as they carry on. Going along with that, and this is more where I get involved personally, is giving them the tools to be able to do that. So there's lots, I don't know how much you're aware of this, but there's lots and lots and lots being done in distance education now. Probably every university around now has at least some component for doing distance education. They're back in Idaho, they're making it a state requirement to take at least one class online at the high school level. But so there's stuff out there already, and the reason why I have anything to do is that everything that's out there now assumes you have a constant high-speed internet connection. So where we work, the last mile, may not, probably don't have an internet connection at all, and you may only be occasionally connected. So the software we develop has to work offline and not just online. And so we build these tools, finding out what people's needs are, and help meet those needs.
We, right here,
Yes.
we, sitting in this room for the most part, are still dealing with 3 rings and a crank phone, perhaps, or not too far from that. You are dealing in a world that is much beyond many of us.
Mm-hmm.
A few of us have cell phones, probably. Maybe a few have an iPhone and an iPad and so forth. So somewhere we're varied. But you and your job, it seems to me, has to be something of a visionary. Where can it go? What is the possibility? And as such, how do we, who are still 3 rings and a phone, how do we pray for you? What is your greatest need as you deal with what lies ahead where we can't even begin to see?
Okay, that's a great question. The thing I think that's that I most desire is in a word, impact. And so it's really, really important to me that, you know, the stuff that we're building actually makes a difference. You know, I'm trusting that the Dial a Devotional system is going to result in more than one person coming to Christ, you know, through the years. So going along with that then is that we would get to hear back some of what that impact is. I'm pretty sure that we don't get to know most of our impact this side of heaven. But just, and I guess this is the big prayer request, is not just that there's impact, we can trust in that, but that I continue to stay motivated between the long periods of time between when we hear of something great happening because of the work. I hope that makes sense. Yes, sir.
Come on, Ernie. Come on, Ernie.
These cell phones and iPads and so on, is it all just in English, or is it different dialects? And are you working with Wycliffe translators?
Okay, that's a really good question. And it's not just English. The first version's English because that's what I know. But so there's a couple answers to that. On most of the software programs that we have, there's typically 1 or 2 files, 1 or 2 documents that have all the text in them. And so we can send off these 1 or 2 documents to a national, to a native speaker to translate for us. And then we can drop those files that we get back into the system, and it'll be in whatever language. So that's from a text-based perspective. Then another really cool thing about all this voice-based stuff that I'm working on is it's all voice, it's all recorded voice. So even it can be used even in places that don't have even a written language yet. But we can go in and record people telling their stories, big part of orality is the Bible stories. So anyway, going to the dial, the devotional system in particular. Yeah, that's recorded all by native speakers. So pretty sure the stuff for Northern Africa is Arabic, and Central Asia is Russian, and then Ethiopia is, I'm not sure what the language is there. Anyone else? Yes, sir. We have a question over here.
Where is it?
Right here in front.
About 15 or 20 years ago, the CEO of MAF reported a modified vision for MAF that included the notion of seeing to it that every mission station in the world would have access to the internet. He realized that there was a change in mission strategy that was involved because you guys were aviation, and now they were joining the cybernetic age. And it was a powerful vision. Can you compare that vision with what you would expect to do, what you might be hoping for in terms of, one, coverage of the world? I'm trying to get my head around the fact that there are blanks in the map where there's no cell nor satellite access.
Mm-hmm.
And that may change however rapidly. But can you give us a notion of how good that coverage is now? And secondarily, let me press an earlier question as to, with technique like this and the technological base, are you trying at all to contact other agencies and involve them in the process?
Yeah, I'll take the second question first. Yes, pretty much exclusively we're working with other agencies, and partnering with them. So yes.
The only thing you're doing.
Pretty much, yeah. There's probably some isolated other things that we're doing kind of directly, but vast majority of our work is in partnership with other organizations. My first question about how wide coverage is and so forth. I'm not sure I can totally answer it in terms of that initial vision that you heard about. But sort of another part of MAF does data communications work. And there's some overlap there. So you can go into places that don't have any internet access, for example, and we can set up internet cafes, places you can go in and get coffee and have internet access. And a lot of places in the world, once you become a Christian, you can't get a job. So we're able to set a pastor up with a internet cafe. It gives him a living, and at the same time, then the internet cafe can double as a church. So that's one of the things. We can go in and set up internet access pretty much anywhere with satellite communications.
What they connect to?
I'm sorry?
What do they connect to in isolation?
They connect to the satellites. Satellites are way up there, so like if I'm in the middle of the jungle somewhere, I got a dish that can connect to a satellite way up here, and then that satellite connects, somewhere else to get data, and it goes back. So that's data communications, that's internet access. On the cell phone question, it's a lot. There's coverage a lot. I mean, a lot of places, way more than I ever imagined there would be, and it's growing. And it's growing all the time. Most countries that weren't already developed in terms of the kind of phone infrastructure that we have here with the copper wires. Nobody's doing that now. Anybody that's putting in new stuff is doing just wireless. So eventually it'll be, probably literally everywhere. And it's in an awful lot of places now. There's one more piece of this, too. In places where we don't have cell phone coverage now, we can, these systems I'm building, we can actually still use them in a couple of ways. One is with RF radios, shortwave radios. I can actually get dial tone on a shortwave radio, and then do all this other stuff. Let's see. So there's that, and then there's another system called a village telecom, and I'm hoping that we may end up doing one of these in Papua in the next year or two. But it's a little kind of box that you go into a jungle village, you give everybody one of these little boxes, and a regular old analog telephone plugs into it, and then everybody in the village can call each other. So they might not be able to call anyone else, but they can call each other, okay? So then if we have the system set up there, they can call into they can use the system. So the training system may be more likely, but the devotional too. And then on top of that, we can potentially connect one of these guys. One of these guys might, like the central server, might be able to have a satellite connection or some kind of a connection out, and then everybody else could potentially actually get out to the rest of the world.
So none of this stuff ever needs a charger.
Oh, that's a really good question. Yeah, power is a huge issue, yeah, that's a huge issue. And solutions are solar, and for one thing, there's also various kinds of generators. I've got like a kind of a hand crank generator kind of thing. I'm sorry? A new, yes. Yeah. But yes, power is definitely a challenge.
Wayne is here. Wayne.
One question.
Yeah.
In 5 years,
Mm-hmm.
where do you think communications will be?
Becky, why don't you wait?
5 years from now, I think that the 20% or so smartphone coverage in the developing world will at least double. And I don't know. It's probably safe to say most of the world has voice coverage now. So I don't know. 5 years will probably be I would think would be approaching 100%.
Earlier in your
Mhm.
talk tonight, you mentioned about. Sorry, I ask questions.
That's great.
Earlier in your discussion tonight, you talked, I think, about one-on-one communication, that you really would like to have something beyond just a prayer letter, that you want personal communication.
Right.
Now, one of the things I know is I got a smartphone for the purpose of texting my grandkids, thinking they might communicate. Guess what? That doesn't help much. They must be on some other different channel, whatever it is. But my question is, with all this communication and so much in texting and so forth, how do we take that and retain the interpersonal skills of communicating one-on-one in a way that you can show God's love beyond the technical capabilities? That's a concern I have about where we're going. In other words, when a missionary went, there was something about a handshake, a warm, fuzzy feeling that took place at some point in time. How can we somehow manage that using technology?
Yeah, that's a challenge for sure, and part of it's cultural. I mean, we were just talking about this at dinner. If you get, kids my son's age, my son fortunately doesn't actually do this himself, but if you get teenagers together, they may be in the same room, and instead of talking to each other, they're texting each other. I don't even get that. But it's sort of a cultural thing. It's surprising if you're doing an online class, for example, where your only communication with the teacher or the other students is by reading forums. Essentially, it's sort of reading emails back and forth to each other. It's surprising the connections that you can make. It really is. And from an educational perspective, sometimes it's better. For example, in a regular classroom situation, extrovert kids or students in general, it can be adults, extroverts are more likely to monopolize conversation, whereas somebody who's not as outgoing by nature may have an awful lot to contribute to the conversation, but just is never assertive enough that they do participate. And in this, so that's synchronous communication happening all at the same time. Then distance education environment is asynchronous, meaning I write something today and then you might read it tomorrow and you respond to me and I read your response, a few days later. So that lets everybody participate. It kind of takes that personality effect out of the equation a little bit. So there's some benefits to it actually from an educational perspective. And then it can also it doesn't necessarily have to be a substitute for face-to-face. I believe you're right that there's something unique about the connection that you and I can have, sitting over a cup of coffee, looking at each other. That's different than if we've got two computers and a million miles between us. But maybe most of the time we're communicating that way, and once in a while we're able to get together face to face, and that makes a big difference. We'll oftentimes work with people, on the other side of the world, and we might do a trip and spend some time there working face to face, just to build the relationship, so that then when we are separated physically, we still the relationship's there. There's one other thing I want to mention, related to your question. this Celluversity project I'm doing for the guy in Asia. There's places in the world, like where this guy works, that are dangerous. Traditional theological education, by extension, traditional distance education, is like this. Everybody comes together in a group for the initial meeting. They get a workbook, and then they go home and they do their workbook. And then later, a week later, a month later, they come together for discussion. Well, there's places in the world where that coming together for discussion will get you killed, so they don't do that a lot. So part of my system will be able to approximate that. We'll be able to approximate that experience. It's still all voice. It's an instructor asks you. Here's the format: we tell you a story, then ask some reflection questions, and you answer the question. Your mentor gets the answer. Here's your answers. He records some feedback for you. Next time you call into the system, you hear his feedback. So there is this back and forth kind of a interactive thing. And so then the guy I'm working with thinks that he can do all this, the official course stuff with the phone system, and then they can still get together later over tea, or which is normal. Everybody does that, and they can have a conversation with everything that happened, in the Celluversity kind of in the background. So like if you and I have read the same book, we can sit down at McDonald's and talk about the book. And if somebody walks by, overhears our conversation, they haven't read the book, they're not going to know what we're talking about. So, so there's actually some advantages to all this, but face-to-face, one-on-one is always going to be best. All right, one more note. They can't. One moment, sir. One other piece of this is multiplication. Okay, a good mentor can't necessarily. He can only get to so many villages, right? So if we can use technology to kind of duplicate him, so to speak, we can extend his reach. Yes, sir.
Can you use Skype?
Can you use Skype? Yes. And any more particular you're thinking about?
I'm thinking about teaching face to face.
Oh, yes.
I mean, here, from what I gather on Skype, the person is talking and you can talk back to them. Can you use that and put it on a screen and use that in teaching in different places around the world?
Yeah, absolutely. You can absolutely do that if you have a good internet connection.
One more quick.
Okay.
When you come up with these ideas,
Uh-huh.
who do you go to? Who can you go and say, and be accepted for your out-of-the-box thinking and be encouraged? Where do you go? Does your wife understand you? Here, bro.
That's a different question that I'm not going to address. Actually, she does. Actually, she does, and I'm very blessed to have a brilliant wife. So she's very, very supportive of all my craziness. She's definitely my number one cheerleader in all this. We have a team, and so like I said, I had this idea for the Celluversity idea, 5 or 6 years ago. And everybody thought it makes sense. The stats for mobile prove out the idea. But I didn't get to do it until we had a client, so. And now we do, so I'm really excited about going forward with that. Yes, ma'am.
Here you go.
I would say praise the Lord that God already knew this. He already knew that this could be. And he's given you the intelligence and the wherewithal to do it. So that's what's exciting to me.
All right, thank you so much for your kind attention and all your great questions.